Close your eyes, relax, and imagine that you are Doris Dorie Miller, a United States Navy sailor who was the first black person to receive the Navy Cross and to be nominated for the Medal of Honor. Imagine the sea at dawn, quiet as a kept secret, the ship breathing slow metallic sighs, while water folds and unfolds against her hull. The air is cool tasting of salt and oil, and a pale wash of light drifts over the decks, like the first brush of a painter's hand. Somewhere below, a boiler murmurs. Somewhere above, a gull calls, and the note hangs, surprised, to find itself in the middle of so much steel. A breeze carries coffee rope tar, and the clean tang of scrubbed metal. You are on the USS West Virginia, anchored in a blue harbor that seems too tranquil to remember the world's troubles. You move through the corridor with a practiced grace palm, sliding along cool paint boots, whispering against the deck. Your world is routine, reveille muster, inspection work, chow, a letter half written and tucked beneath a thin mattress. You keep a rhythm where other men keep worry, a steady beat that turns hours into something trustworthy. Your name is Doris Miller, though friends call you Dorie. You were born where the land is hot and honest, in Waco, Texas, where cicadas sing and fields glow like brass in summer. You carry those fields in your shoulders, the long strength of ropes and sacks and fence posts, the straight-backed patience of sunlit days. You carry your mother's calm, your father's stubborn decency, and the boxing lessons that taught you to keep your feet beneath you and your eyes level. You carry a wish that work should be clean and care should be plain, the kind of wish that makes a man steady in small things before he is tested in large ones. On the mess deck, lights hum a quiet beat, and a row of cups waits upside down, like helmets ready for inspection. Steam lifts and veils. The sink sings a thin metal song as water runs over pans, and a polished ladle shows a warped oval of your face. The watchman's steps pass outside, measured as a metronome. You pour beans into a tub, measure flour test heat with the back of your hand. It is the kind of morning that takes no effort to love steady, useful, familiar, a well-worn code of hours. You know where every knife sits, which handle is loose, which corner of the table rocks, unless its leg is wedged with folded paper. You know the way bread behaves when weather turns, how dough rises quicker on damp days and sulks on dry ones. You know that kindness is a tool that never dulls, and that a clean floor will always make the day start right. Men come through with jokes and yawns, with the smell of soap and shave lotion, and the faint gasoline bite of deck work. You answer in few words and many actions that ask for no applause. Outside, the harbor gleams. The sun still low rides a thin path of gold across the water and chalks white along the edges of waves. You could watch that light for hours and not tire. It reminds you of home, the way dawn lay on cotton fields, like a promise, the clatter of a kitchen radio, tinny with songs and church news, the laughter of brothers' bare feet on warm boards, the sigh a porch makes when a day begins. On the bulkhead near the hatch, someone has chalked a cartoon, a skinny sailor with a towering stack of plates, eyes popping, knees wobbling. Below it a plea, don't drop the chow. The chalk dust smears under your thumb, leaving a pale curve. You grin without thinking. There is always someone who can make a joke out of the day, and you are grateful for that. It keeps the edges round. You take a quiet minute with your hands around a cup that warms your fingers. Coffee steam fogs the air between you and the day. In that pause, you count the ship's familiar sounds and find comfort in their order. The thrum, the tick, the faint cable creak, the far clank of a wrench, the low murmur of voices getting ready for inspection. A ship is a city that fits in your hands if you let it. You do. You learn its street names by ear. You are not thinking about greatness. You are thinking about oatmeal, about the balance of salt and sugar, about the way the spoon ought to feel in your palm. You are thinking about keeping the line moving so no one is late to their station. You are thinking about steady, patient, practical things. In the far future, people will use words like hero and legend when they say your name. This morning, the word that fits you best is useful. It sits lightly on your shoulders. Like an apron, the sun climbs a fraction. Shadows soften. The decks receive their first compliments of footfalls. Somewhere, a petty officer clears his throat, and the sound carries the authority of a bell. Somewhere, a young man laughs too loudly at an old joke. Somewhere a letter is finished, folded, sealed the stamp, pressed with a thumb that smells of soap and steel. Somewhere, a prayer is said quickly and quietly, not because of fear, but because it seems the right way to greet the morning. You move through the galley with unshowy accuracy. A tray shifts, a ladle swings, a towel twists water into the floor drain. The clock marks small victories with a click. If there is pressure, it is the pressure you choose to do a thing well, for no reason except that the thing deserves it. If there is hope, it is the hope that competence is its own kind of care. Later, when others speak about you, they will begin in the middle, because the middle has fire and smoke, and the sharpness of danger. They will forget or never know mornings that taught your hands to be calm, your eyes to see quickly, your breath to stay even. They will not know how many times you steadied a pot to spare a man a burn, how often you wiped a spill before it could trip a hurried foot. They will not know the discipline learned from small tasks, but you will know, and that knowledge will be with you when the hour turns hard. You glance at the clock and think of schedules, inspections, drills, the routine that is the spine of a ship. Routine makes safety. Routine makes courage possible. You are grateful for it. You are grateful for the men whose names you know, the way you know, recipes, each with his particularities, each with his preferred portion, each with a story he tells when the night runs long. You are grateful for the work that makes your body pleasantly tired and your sleep clean. When you have a second, you pause in the scullery doorway and look down a corridor, awash with reflected light. The floor glows faintly. A hatch stands open like a square of shadow. Somewhere, a flag moves, and the sound is a soft, dry flutter, like hands being rubbed together. You let the air pass into you and out again, a simple exchange of quiet for quiet. The day is young. The day is generous. What color is the sea when sunlight is new? It is blue, yes, but not only blue. It is pewter, where a cloud crosses silver, where a ripple runs green near the shore, where sand lifts to meet it. You watch its changes through a porthole and think how a man can learn patience from water. There is work enough in the world, and much of it is weather. You will take both as they come. Your hands are large and capable of fact. You notice only when a smaller object disappears inside your grip. The men ask you in good humor to open jars, to shift crates, to carry a thing a few steps farther than most care to. You oblige, not because strength is a show, but because it is a tool. You like tools. You respect what they can do when held correctly. A pot can burn or nourish. A rope can bind or save. A man can harm or help. Choice sits in the fingers. Some mornings when work takes you above, you pause on deck to let the sun wash your face. You close your eyes and feel heat draw a line across your eyelids. You listen to wakes slapping against steel and to faint music from another ship's radio. Tinny and brave, determined to make a dance floor out of a war. Sound carries over water low and far. Somewhere on some deck, a sailor taps his foot and forgets to be lonesome for 3 good minutes. You have learned to make your heart quiet, even when the world offers reasons to hurry. Perhaps it was boxing that taught you that quiet, the steady in and out that keeps the mind clear while the body works. Perhaps it was church, the Sunday rhythm of hymn and sermon, and the close benediction of shed breath. Perhaps it was fields and fences and chores that never ended the long lesson that nothing resents being done well. However it came, you keep it. There is a photograph tucked in your locker. The edges are worn soft where your thumb finds them. In it, your mother's eyes are bright. Your father stands a little behind, as if to hold up the whole sky with his shoulders. And a younger you leans forward, as if the camera were a friend you might outrun. You look at it now, and then, not to feel far away, but because those faces remind you of the plain currency of care. On the mess line, a young sailor with a freckled nose thanks you with an earnestness that would embarrass him if he heard it out loud. You nod, as if he had asked about the weather. Gratitude is best taken simple. You scoop, you serve, you wipe the rim of a tray so neatly that anyone watching would think some medal might be given for it. No medals are given for it. You do it anyway. When pans are clean and counters quiet, you take another slow lap of the ship, with your mind checking each sound's place in the pattern. Everything has a cadence. You have learned to step into it the way you would step onto a moving train, matching speed, trusting timing. It is not that the ship cannot surprise you. It is that you know how to meet surprise with steadiness. You pause in the scullery doorway and look down a corridor awash with reflected light. The floor glows faintly. A hatch stands open like a square of shadow, and a flag stirs with a soft, dry flutter. You breathe in, breathe out, trading quiet for quiet. The day feels generous, and you are ready to earn it. There is a photograph tucked in your locker. The edges are worn soft where your thumb finds them. Your mother's eyes are bright. Your father's shoulders look strong enough to carry weather. And a younger you leans forward, as if the camera were a friend you might outrun. You keep it to remember the plain currency of care. Sometimes work takes you above. You pause on deck and let the sun wash your face, eyes closed, while heat draws a line across your lids. Wakes slap against steel, and a distant radio plays something cheerful and tinny. Sound carries over water, and for 3 good minutes, a sailor somewhere forgets to be lonesome. If you are listening in a dark room, if your own breath has settled into a soft rhythm, imagine the deck cool under your palm, the metal unyielding but kind in its predictability. Imagine the light on water and the coffee in your hands and the way names sound when spoken low in early hours. Imagine a morning that belongs to routine and to care. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the world be simple for a while. In a little while, the day will ask more of you. It always does. But for now, in this stretch of undemanding time, feel the comfort that comes from clean work and ready hands. Feel how the ship holds you as surely as it holds 1,000 stories. Feel how the harbor holds the ship. Feel how even in a world as wide and troubled as this one, a small act done well, can be a kind of prayer. If you find peace in these slow walks through remembered mornings, stay with us for the journey ahead. We will move gently into the hours when routine meets history, and we will do it without hurry. If these quiet passages help you rest, subscribe, follow, or leave a soft word for the next listener who might need a harbor. For now, rest in this morning. It will carry you farther than you think. If these stories bring you calm, you can linger with us night after night, returning whenever the day has been too sharp. Add your quiet voice to ours by subscribing or following, and share a word so another traveler may find this harbor. Imagine Texas in the autumn of 1919. The summer heat has eased, but the air still holds the smell of sun-baked earth and cotton fields. Waco lies in the middle of the state, a town with church spires, clapboard houses, and dirt roads that remember every passing wagon. It is a place where life is measured in chores and seasons, where people rise early and rest only when darkness settles. In a small wooden house near the edge of town, a baby is born to Connery and Henrietta Miller. They name him Doris, after a family friend, though in time most will call him Dorie. The house is modest: 2 rooms, a small porch, a chimney that works hard in winter and sits lazy in the heat. The boards creak under light feet. The kitchen smells of flower beans and whatever vegetables the garden has decided to offer that week. A patched quilt hangs over the bed, sewn from scraps of worn shirts and faded dresses. Outside, a tin bucket catches rainwater when the barrels are full, and a chicken coop clucks softly at the edge of the yard. Henrietta is a woman with steady hands and a voice that can calm a restless child or a restless man. Connery works the land and, when needed, takes jobs in town carrying lumber, fixing fences, hauling sacks. The family has little, but they keep what they have clean and cared for. Sundays are for church, where hymns rise and fall, like the breath of the whole town. The Millers teach their children Dorie among them, that work is not a burden if you let it shape you. As a boy, Dorie learns the feel of rope between his palms, the weight of a full bucket, the patience needed to coax stubborn animals. He runs barefoot in the dust plays, games with neighborhood children, and listens to the older men talk on porches, their stories drifting like smoke into the warm air. He watches his mother cook, measuring by sight, tasting with care. He learns that strength is more than muscle, though muscle is part of it. School is a walk away, and Dorie carries his books in a sack, the pages worn at the corners from eager fingers. He is not the top student, but he learns quickly when the lesson interests him, and he never forgets what matters to him. In the afternoons, he helps at home or finds work in the neighborhood, anything to ease the family's load. By his teenage years, he has grown tall and broad-shouldered, with hands strong from chores and eyes steady from watching the horizon. It is in school that Dorie first tries boxing. The sport is popular among young men, a mix of discipline and display. In the ring, he learns to keep his feet beneath him, to guard, to read an opponent's movement as if it were a sentence waiting to be finished. The rhythm of boxing strike step guard mirrors the rhythm of work and life, always ready, always balanced. Friends remember that he could lift a heavy sack as easily as another boy might lift a pail, but he never used his size to intimidate. He carried it lightly. The years pass and the country changes. The Great Depression tightens its grip and jobs grow scarce. Even in Texas, where farms still yield cotton and corn, money is thin. For a young black man in Waco, opportunities are narrow. Segregation shapes every street, every school, every job listing. There are places Dorie cannot go, things he cannot do, not because he lacks the will, but because the law says so. His parents teach him to navigate this world with dignity, to hold his head high without inviting unnecessary trouble. By the late 1930s, Dorie is in his late teens. He works wherever he can, at a diner in the fields in town loading freight. The pay is meager, but it keeps food on the table. Still, he wants more than Waco can give. He hears about the Navy, not as a place of glory for men like him, but as a steady paycheck, 3 meals a day, and a chance to see beyond Texas. In the Navy, black sailors are limited to certain roles, most often as mess attendants, serving food, cleaning, maintaining officers' quarters. It is not glamorous, and it offers no quick path to rank, but it is work. And in 1939, work is something to value. Dorie visits the recruiting station. The room smells faintly of ink and uniforms kept too long in storage. Posters on the wall show clean-cut sailors smiling on bright decks, the sea behind them a painted blue. The recruiter measures him, notes his height over 6 feet and his weight well over 200 pounds of solid muscle. There is a pause, perhaps a raised eyebrow, but the paperwork is filled out. On September 16th, 1939, Doris Miller joins the United States Navy. Training is brief and focused. Mess attendants learn the routines of ship life, how to serve efficiently, keep the galley clean, store food safely, and maintain discipline. Dorie adapts quickly. He knows how to work in a kitchen, how to follow orders, how to keep a space orderly. The sea is new to him, though the endless water, the pitch and roll of a deck beneath his feet. He learns to tie knots to move with the ship's sway, to find his way through narrow corridors and steep ladders. His first assignment is aboard the USS Pyro, an ammunition ship. It is a place of constant caution. Every movement is measured, every task double-checked. The smell of cordite hangs faint in the air, and the crew is mindful that any carelessness could have disastrous consequences. Here, Dorie learns the importance of precision, of trusting the man beside you to do his job without error. From the Pyro, he transfers to the USS West Virginia, a battleship with towering guns and a crew of over 1,000. The West Virginia is a floating city with its own routines, its own small society. Life aboard is a blend of work and waiting. In the mornings, the galley hums with activity pots, clanging voices, calling orders, trays sliding across counters. Dorie works with quiet efficiency, moving heavy loads with ease, cleaning and organizing without fuss. His size and strength make him a favorite when there's heavy lifting to be done, but he is just as ready to peel potatoes or scrub a floor. When the day's work is done, there is time for rest. Some men write letters home, others play cards or read. Dorie enjoys the company of his shipmates, but he is not loud. He listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, it is with the kind of plain honesty that earns trust. He learns the ways of the ship, the sounds that mean all is well, and the sounds that mean something is wrong. By 1940, the world is deep in war, though America has not yet entered it. The West Virginia sails the Pacific, training, patrolling, showing the flag in distant ports. Dorie sees places he could not have imagined from the porch in Waco Islands, with beaches of white sand, harbors lined with ships from many nations, markets fragrant with spices and strange fruits. Yet, even in these new places, the divisions of home follow him. Black sailors still serve apart from white sailors, still limited to the same narrow duties. It is a reminder that the sea is wide, but not wide enough to leave certain realities behind. In the quiet moments, he thinks of Waco, of his family, of the fields, of the way the sun felt on his face in the Texas morning. He writes home when he can, his handwriting large and careful. He tells his mother not to worry, that the food is good, the work steady, the crew decent. He does not speak of the loneliness that sometimes comes, the distance that cannot be measured in miles alone. He keeps those feelings to himself, tucking them away, like the photograph in his locker. The months turn the ship's log, fills with routine entries, drills, inspections, small repairs, supply runs. Each day is much like the one before, until it isn't. And as 1941 approaches, the Pacific grows more tense. In the harbors and on the airwaves, there is talk of Japan, of the possibility of conflict. But aboard the West Virginia, life goes on meals to prepare decks, to swab orders to follow. Dorie keeps his head down and his work solid. He has no way of knowing that history will call his name before the year is out. It is Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. The air above Pearl Harbor is cool and clear, touched with the faint salt of the Pacific. From the deck of the USS West Virginia, the water looks as if it has been brushed smooth by a careful hand. Gentle ripples catch the first sun, and the mountains in the distance stand blue and quiet, like they have promised to keep watch. Below deck in the galley, the work is unhurried. The smell of coffee drifts with the hum of a percolator. Somewhere nearby, a pan clinks as it meets a counter. A sailor laughs softly at something said over breakfast. The light through a porthole makes a round, slow-moving shape on the bulkhead as the ship shifts in the water. Dorie Miller is already awake, already moving. His morning is muscle memory: check supplies, see to the mess, prepare for the day's meals. This is a Sunday, which means a quieter breakfast service, a few extra minutes to talk to. Let the smell of bread and beans hang in the air before the next watch begins. He wipes his hands on a towel and looks toward the open hatch, where sunlight falls in a neat gold-edged rectangle. Then in the distance, faint at first, a sound that does not belong. It is a deep rolling thud, like a heavy drum struck somewhere far off. The vibration is subtle, but felt in the feet more than heard in the ears. Another follows closer, a pause. Then the ship's alarm begins. It is sharp, urgent, not part of any drill scheduled for this morning. Men look at each other, the space between heartbeats suddenly louder than the room itself. Someone says, "Air," read the words, clipped and flat. Boots hit the deck hard, running toward stations. The calm of a moment ago collapses under the weight of something vast and unseen. Dorie steps into the passageway, the alarm still calling overhead. Down the corridor, sailors are already moving, some to battle stations, some toward damage control. The smell of the air is changing. It carries smoke, faint but growing. Above, the sky is no longer an empty blue. Aircraft, dark shapes, fast and purposeful, are cutting through it, their engines a long, insistent growl. Sunlight flashes off wings. The rising sound of machine guns joins the alarm, a staccato beat that seems to come from every direction at once. A bomb hits nearby, too close. The ship shudders from keel to deck. In the galley, cups and plates leap and scatter across the floor. Somewhere, metal screams as it bends. Somewhere, a man cries out. The air pressure changes, heavy in the chest. Dorie's first thought is not of fighting. It is of helping. The path to the deck is chaos. Men moving in every direction. Smoke beginning to creep through vents. The sound of water rushing in from somewhere deep below. He moves toward the open, toward the place where injured men might be found. The West Virginia is listing just slightly, but enough that the angle of every surface feels strange. Another explosion, this one shattering a section of the deck. Heat rolls through the air, thick and dry, like opening the door to an oven too close to your face. On the port side, smoke curls in dark ropes against the sunlight. A man stumbles past, blood on his sleeve, eyes wide and searching. Dorie catches him by the arm, steadies him, guides him towards safety. The smell of burning oil is sharp now, clinging to the back of the throat. Somewhere above, the ship's anti-aircraft guns are firing the rhythm uneven faster. When a target is near, slower. When the barrel swings to find the next. Dorie has never been trained to man one of those guns, but he moves toward the sound. On deck, the world is a different shape. The sky is torn by smoke and tracer fire. The water is stained with oil, and here and there, flames run along its surface, small orange flags in the wind. The air is alive with the whine of diving planes, the shudder of bombs, the sharp crack of explosions on neighboring ships. Someone shouts for help. Near the aft, an unmanned .50 caliber Browning sits ready, its previous operator down and bleeding. Without hesitation, Dorie steps in. His hands are large enough to grip the weapon easily, his stance wide and steady, despite the ship's movement. The metal is warm under his palms, the trigger a familiar kind of tension. He sights a plane, banking low, its red insignia clear even through the haze. He squeezes. The gun roars vibration, running through his arms and into his chest. Brass casings clatter at his feet. Time feels both slow and fast, each second stretched into detail, yet gone as soon as it comes. The smell of gunpowder mixes with smoke and salt. The plane veers, trailing a thin, dark line before it disappears behind a column of smoke. Another comes. He fires again. Around him, sailors work to save their ship, hauling hoses, tending to the wounded, shouting coordinates to those still able to fire. The deck is slick in places, water, oil, blood, all running together. Dorie moves between the gun and the fallen lifting men as if they weigh nothing, carrying them towards safety. More hits rock the West Virginia. Somewhere deep inside, her compartments flood. Fires burn unchecked in others. The sound of orders is hoarse and urgent, now voices breaking from the strain. Minutes pass, like hours. The attack comes in waves, planes swooping in, releasing their payloads, pulling away, only to make room for the next. Dorie keeps firing when he can, carrying when he must. His uniform is smeared with soot, his face streaked with sweat. When the last wave passes, the silence feels wrong. It is not true silence. There is still the crackle of fire, the groan of the ship's hull, the calls for medics, but it feels emptied of the pressure that had filled every moment before. The sky is still smoky, the water still burning in places. The West Virginia is wounded badly, sinking into the mud of the harbor's bottom. But she does not capsize. Men are still alive aboard her, and those who can move keep working. Dorie helps carry the last of the wounded. He can find his arms, heavy but certain. Only later will he realize how much he has done, how many men owe their lives to those steady hands. In the moment, it feels like nothing more than the only choice available to act, to help to keep moving, until there is no one left who needs him. Morning begins the way all good mornings begin at sea, with a sound you trust. It's not loud, not jarring. It's the ship's soft, steady thrum machinery, humming somewhere below the hull, answering with a faint, contented vibration. A breath of cool air comes through a vent and tastes faintly of salt and oil. In darkness, a red night light lays a thin glow along the edges of bunks, like the last ember of a campfire. Someone above you shifts the springs. Give a brief sigh, and then stillness returns, the kind earned by men who work hard and sleep where they fall. Reveille is gentle today. The non-com's voice is firm, but not sharp, like a hand on a shoulder that knows the name it's touching. Boots find the floor, laces hiss through eyelets. The first line of the day is written in leather squeaks and stifled yawns. You swing your legs down, plant your feet, and pause just long enough to notice that the ship is riding calm. The Pacific is in a good mood. Your body, too, no aches, except the honest ones that come from work done right. The corridor holds a mild chill that wakes your skin. You pass the same bulkheads and hatches you pass every morning, palm gliding over cool paint fingertips, reading the ship's braille, rivet seam, stenciled numbers, the tiny chip where a toolbox once nicked the enamel. A hatch opens to the mess deck and the warm, familiar world you help keep in order. Light here is brighter, clean fluorescence that makes steel look almost friendly, and warmth rolls out of the galley like a cheerful fog, carrying the day's first good news coffee. You don your apron as if it were a rank you earned yesterday and must earn again today. Hands wash soap up to the wrists, rinse until water runs clear, then dry on a towel, soft from 100 washings. Pans clink in a language you speak fluently. A kettle begins to murmur. The percolator answers with its own steady pulse. You can tell by the smell if the grind is right, by the feel of the ladle, whether the oatmeal needs another whisper of water. A good galley sounds like a clock, everything ticking toward readiness, nothing skipping a beat. Men arrive in twos and threes, voices still low from sleep, hair combed in quick lines, faces warm from a hasty shave. They line their trays without fuss, the way rain lines a window each drop, knowing exactly where to go. You move along the steam table with your unhurried accuracy, scoop settle, wipe the rim, hand it over. Morning Miller, morning Chief, 2 eggs. You got it. Please. And thank you aren't in the manual, but you keep them polished anyway. They make the ship run smoother than grease. From a porthole, dawn lifts its shoulder over the harbor. The light outside is soft as bread dough, not yet proofed into the firm gold of day. You catch a glance through glass water, dark as slate, a rim of cloud sitting quiet above the mountains. A thin seam of brightness, opening where sea and sky meet. If peace had a color, it would be this first light. If steadiness had a temperature, it would be the warmth on your forearms where steam settles and disappears. After breakfast, the line winds down and the ship's other heartbeats take over. Broom heads, swishing decks, swab water, slopping into buckets. Brushes, drumming down companionways. The tin plink of a socket wrench, answering a bolt. You and the galley crew move into the second stanza of morning clean and reset. Counters wiped until they shine like a lake with the wind laid down. Pots nested in a tidy column. Knives aligned edges faced safely to the bulkhead. You know where everything lives and why it matters that everything returns there. A ship is a promise, kept by small repetitions. Inspection comes and goes, like weather forecast, expected brisk, the sort of event that rewards those who respect dust. The chief's eye is good, so is yours. He nods once, which is his way of saying a paragraph. When he leaves, you allow yourself the tiniest breath of pride and stash it where you keep other useful things. The place inside that makes you reach to straighten a towel that's already straight. The late morning hours are for prep. A list appears, pencil neat, and becomes action potatoes into a sink of cold water that turns cloudy as the peels fall away. Onions cross-hatched, fine enough to melt when heat meets them. Carrots lined like soldiers on a cutting board, their orange bright as new paint. Your knife has a sound you like, a clean, dry click against wood, the honest syllables of food being turned into food. Another sailor hums under his breath, some radio tune that leapt ship to ship across last week's anchorage. Work makes room for music, and the day gets better for it. When you step topside to carry supplies from a storeroom, the morning is now full and confident. The sky has forgotten its earlier shyness. It's a clear blue that looks like it could hold a man's hope without spilling a drop. The breeze has picked up just enough to salt your lips and turn flags into handwriting that only the wind can read. Other ships sit at their moorings like enormous patient animals, breathing smoke and sunlight. You take a minute longer than necessary, with the view and cheat no one by it. Beauty, like discipline, strengthens a man when he lets it. Back below lunch arrives on the dot, as it always does. The line is longer, the appetites bigger, the jokes louder. A machinist's mate tells a story that earns a laugh 3 places back. You can't hear it all, but laughter is contagious enough without context. There is pleasure in portioning things right. The man who needs an extra ladle because his shift will run hard. The one who wants a little less because he's got mail to read. You don't say so, but you keep track. Good memory is a form of respect. After lunch, the ship sighs into its afternoon stride. Heat builds in the metal bones, and the air takes on the faint shimmer that means you should drink water now and not learn thirst later. In a lull, you wipe down a handle no one will notice, but everyone will touch. You refill a sugar tin before it empties, because readiness is sweeter than urgency. Out in the passageway, a petty officer calls cadence, and a flock of boots falls into step. Their rhythm runs beneath yours like a second heartbeat. When work grants you 15 minutes, you claim a seat by a porthole and unfold a letter like it might break into song. The paper still smells faintly of home laundry, soap, kitchen, heat, the dust of dry roads, scents that your memory translates for your chest. Your mother writes about church suppers and Mrs. Carver's lemon pie, about a neighbor's new calf, and how the old dog sleeps deeper than a judge at midnight. She asks if the sea ever grows tired of moving. You smile at that and try to answer in a way that will bring her the ocean without bringing her its worries. You write large and careful, the way a man sets fence posts. You tell her your bunk is fine and the food more than fine. You write that the men are good company and the ship's crew is a choir that knows its parts. You do not mention that some doors still close for men like you, not because your mother doesn't know, but because today is not the day to add weight to her shoulders. You end with an ordinary truth. I am well, and I am doing what I said I would do. That is a sentence a parent can sleep on. Afternoon cooking is quieter than morning's rush. It's a time for slow things, beans persuaded instead of boiled into submission, meat coaxed tender under a lid that clacks when steam asks to be seen. You keep one eye on the clock and one on the pot's surface, reading bubbles the way a bosun reads weather in a horizon. A young sailor comes to help, and you show him in three careful motions how to chop without chasing the knife. He thanks you with the relief of a man who has stopped making the same mistake twice. Sometimes a drill interrupts the recipe. A bell rings, a word is passed, and the ship becomes a school that teaches speed. You step into your station with the other's hands, quick, mind clear, heart steady. Hoses uncoil, valves spin hatches dog. You picture water as a person you must outthink. When the all clear comes, the ship releases a breath you didn't know she was holding. You return to the galley, and the pot has behaved itself. You reward it with a stir that feels like a handshake. There are chores that have no poetry, and you do them with the same respect you give the ones that do. Trash goes where it should. Storage gets tallied. A dented pan is hammered back into usefulness with the kind of patience that redeems more than metal. You hang aprons to dry in a row that would please a drill master. You wipe the last smear off the last plate, because leaving one spot behind is a lie you don't tell. Supper begins while the sun is still considering its exit. Through the high windows, the light comes in at an angle that makes everything look honest. The best light for faces, the best light for truth. Men's voices now are the voices of those who have earned their food, lower fuller, idling after long idles. Somewhere behind you, a radio mutters a ball game from a station that fades and returns like a guest who can't decide whether to stay. You don't know the teams. The score means less than the cadence of argument, the pleasure men take in the idea of contest. The evening meal always carries a little ceremony. It is not in the menu. It is in the way a tray is set down with a sigh, the way a man sits and pushes his hat back a finger's width, the way conversation loosens its tie and unbuttons the top button. You serve the last man last with the same hand you serve the first man first, because fairness is not a luxury aboard a ship. When the line ends, you take your own plate and find a corner. You eat without rush. You eat with the appreciation of a man who has spent the afternoon making sure others could do the same. After supper, the ship goes golden. Sunlight slides long along passageways, throws the shadows of ladder rungs into perfect prison bars that hold nothing. On the weather deck, the air has cooled, and men drift toward it the way birds drift toward masts. Someone cleans a clarinet until it shines like a black river. A handful of sailors set up a game of cribbage that contains between moves the whole history of how friends talk. You lean on a rail and look where the water looks. Light sits in bands on the harbor. Distant roofs hold the day's last heat, as if cupping it for later. You always spare a glance for the flag. Evening wind finds it, and the cloth answers with the softest ripper sound that seems to say, both hold and let go. The halyards tick against the staff wind's knuckles on a wooden door. Farther down the pier, a sailor laughs the kind of laugh that ends a story well. You can tell by the length of it, and by the way silence afterward feels satisfied. Dark gathers without hurry. The first lamps come on yellow as kitchen windows in neighborhoods that smell like supper. The ship's white lights blink in ones and twos, a constellation you could navigate by if all charts burned. You return below for the last round of the day's small covenants, surfaces, wiped knives, put to bed ovens, given their goodnight pat. You wash your hands and hold them under cold water a moment longer than necessary, because the shock reminds you that you are a body as well as a set of duties. In the berthing compartment, bunks bloom with human shapes, arranged in the practical geometry of tired men. You climb into yours and lie on your backhands, folded on your chest, the way a man listens to a story he has told himself before. The ship hums her lullaby. Air moves a shallow tide in a shallow bay. Somewhere, a page turns. Somewhere, a pencil scratches the last line of a letter, I am well. You think, as you do most nights, about the odd fact of your first name and the way a nickname can straighten it into something that fits. About Texas heat and the porch that faced west, and how the sky there was large enough to inventory every thought a boy can have. About how the Navy gave you distances to measure with your eye and taught your feet to believe in steel. About how work, repeated daily, turns into a backbone a man can lean on. When the hour requires more than he thinks he has, there are doors still closed that ought to open. You know it. Everybody knows it, whether they say so or not. But tonight, the ship feels like a room where you belong. And belonging is not a small thing. You let that truth be a pillow under your neck. The future can come in the morning. It always does. Just before sleep, you picture the mess deck empty and perfect tables, aligned benches, clean the floor, thinking its quiet thoughts. You picture a pot, resting a knife, asleep in its slot, a towel drying into tomorrow. You picture the deck above, stars beginning their slow parade, and here boots you will not remember in the morning, because they will have joined a million other steps in the grand arithmetic of shipboard days. If you are listening in a dark room, breathe with the ship. In through the nose, a count of 4. Out through the mouth, a count of 6. Imagine the way warm light lays itself along a steel counter and makes it gentle. Imagine coffee's first steam and bread's soft center and the exact sound a well-honed knife makes when it tells a carrot the truth. Imagine rails cool beneath your forearms and wind writing its careful cursive in your hair. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders sink. Let routine be the conversation your muscles have with mercy. Tomorrow will be like today, and not like today at all. That is how life at sea keeps a man honest. You will rise, and the ship will rise, and both of you will make the same vows you made yesterday, to hold steady, to do small things well, to listen for the right alarms and ignore the wrong ones, to keep faith with a crew that keeps faith with you. Somewhere over the horizon, history is already walking toward you in boots you cannot yet hear. You do not need to meet it early. You only need to be ready when it knocks. For now, there is nothing in the world but the sound under your pillow and the clean fatigue in your bones. For now, there is this good ship and this good night, and the knowledge that usefulness, humbly practiced, can turn into something a man might call grace. For now, close your eyes. The sea is on watch. If these long, slow hours bring you rest, let them keep doing so. Stay with us on these quiet voyages. Subscribe, follow, or leave a gentle word so the next listener can find their way aboard. We'll be here tomorrow in the same light, with the same work teaching our hands again what our hearts already know. The ocean can be a fine companion on a calm day. It will hold you steady, cradle the hull like a patient friend. But on other days, it becomes something else entirely. Something vast, indifferent, and relentless. Even for a man as strong as Dorie, the Pacific could be cruel. The West Virginia was a big ship, but no ship is big enough to make the sea small. In storms, the deck would tilt until every step had to be measured, every hand ready to grab a line or rail. The horizon would disappear behind walls of water, and the sky would lean so close you could almost believe it was falling. Salt spray stung the eyes and left a crust on the skin that no towel could wipe away. In the galley, pots and pans became restless things, clanging against their chains, threatening to jump, if not tethered tight. The smell of diesel and cooking oil mixed with the sharper tang of metal and brine. Work was never light. As a mess attendant, Dorie's duties began before sunrise and ended long after most men had taken their rest. There were bulk provisions to haul from storage, sacks of potatoes heavy enough to make a back complain, crates of canned goods that bit into the palms if carried too far without gloves. Water had to be boiled, bread, baked meat, trimmed and portioned. Dishes had to be scrubbed until they shone, and floors swabbed until not a drop of grease betrayed the next man's footing. It was work that lived in the shoulders and forearms, in the lower back and the arches of the feet. But the weight of the work was only one kind of burden. There was another heavier in its own way, the weight of being told in words and in silence exactly how far you were allowed to go. In the Navy of the late 1930s and early 40s, a black sailor could wear the uniform, serve under the same flag stand, in the same danger, but not hold the same jobs. You could be a mess attendant, a steward, perhaps an officer's cook. You could clean the silver press, the dress whites, bring coffee to a man who could one day command a ship. But you could not stand at the helm, could not man the engine room, could not rise through the ranks into leadership. The ladder was there, but for you it stopped after the first rung. Dorie knew this from the day he enlisted. It was in the fine print of the recruiting posters, in the quiet glances at the induction center. It was in the way the assignments were handed out, without ever needing to be explained. And though he accepted the work, because it was steady, because it was honest, he could not help but feel the invisible walls around it. Sometimes the injustice was open. A remark said too loud in the mess line. A laugh that had no warmth in it. A reminder that you were here to serve, not to be seen. Other times, it was quieter, woven into the fabric of daily life, being overlooked when volunteers were called for special training, being passed over for duties that could lead to promotion, being kept out of spaces where decisions were made. The ship was a world of compartments, and not all of them were built from steel. Yet Dorie found ways to hold his dignity. He kept his uniform sharp, his work beyond reproach. He learned the rhythms of the ship so well, he could anticipate needs before they were spoken. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, it was with a calm that left no room for mockery. Strength, he knew, was more than the weight a man could lift. It was the way he carried himself when the load was unfair. The physical grind and the quiet limits worked together like opposing tides pulling at different parts of a man. There were days when the muscles ached from the weight of supplies, and the spirit ached from the weight of being told you could be more, but not here. There were nights when the ship rocked so violently you had to wedge yourself in your bunk just to sleep, and mornings when the first face you saw made it clear you would need to brace yourself for more than the sea. Still, Dorie endured. He found small refuges, the smell of fresh bread cooling on a rack, the feel of a letter from home in his pocket, the brief peace of looking out over the rail and seeing nothing but horizon. He took pride in the parts of the ship that shone because of his care in the meals that sent men back to work with their strength renewed. And in the quiet of his own thoughts, he held on to the belief that a man's worth could not be measured by the duties someone else assigned him. Long before the first shot is fired in a war, It exists in the minds of those who might have to fight it. Even aboard a ship at anchor, the war was always near enough to touch. It came in the form of news bulletins, crackling over the radio voices, tight with urgency, as they spoke of battles far from Pearl Harbor. It came in the orders, posted on the notice board, training schedules, growing more intense, readiness drills coming more often, rumors of where the fleet might go next. It came in the letters from home, where friends talked about ration books and factory jobs about brothers and cousins already overseas. You could feel the world tightening one knot at a time. For Dorie, the pressure was quieter, but no less real. In peacetime, a ship was a machine for routine. In wartime, even the edge of wartime, it became a machine for vigilance. You learned to listen for sounds that didn't belong, a change in the thrum of the engines, a sharpness in an officer's voice, the sudden silence after a long conversation on the deck. You noticed the way men carried themselves differently. Shoulders, higher eyes, always half on the sky. Even laughter had a certain tension to it, as if it might break at the wrong word. There was the constant knowledge that his role, limited as it was, would not keep him safe if trouble came. A torpedo would not pause to decide whether the man in its path was a gunner or a cook. Fire would not choose its victims based on rank or assignment. And in those moments when drills turned serious, when the alarms blared, and everyone moved as if it might be real, Dorie felt the truth settle into his bones. War does not ask if you are ready. Sleep, which had once come easily after long days, began to carry interruptions. Not nightmares, not yet, but restless dreams, climbing a ladder that kept extending above him, reaching for a hand that pulled away, hearing his name called in a voice he couldn't place. He would wake and lie still, listening to the soft churn of the water against the hull, telling himself that the day ahead would be like any other. It worked most of the time. Then came the losses. In the Navy, you learned quickly that the sea could take as much as the enemy. Men fell ill. Accidents happened on deck, in the engine room, in the boatswain's rigging. But in wartime, the scale changed. Ships went out and did not come back. Faces you'd seen at breakfast were gone by supper. Their bunks stripped, their few possessions stored or sent to families far away. Dorie saw it first, in letters, the kind folded differently with handwriting that pressed harder into the paper, as if the weight of bad news could be lessened by making the words firm. Later he saw it in person. Wounded men brought aboard after an accident or skirmish, their uniforms torn, their eyes either fixed on a far point or refusing to open. He helped carry them, cleaned around them, listened to the clipped voices of medics saying things they did not want overheard. Nothing made the reality sharper than the empty chair in the mess. It would sit for a day or two before someone else took the place. But in that time, it was a reminder as clear as any flag at half-mast. The ship went on because it had to, but the absence moved with it, a small hollow space no amount of noise could fill. The hardest moments were those when help came too late. Once in heavy seas, a man went overboard during a night maneuver. The alarm sounded, searchlights swept the water, lifebuoys were thrown, engines slowed. But the ocean was dark and rough, and by morning the search had ended. The next day, the ship's routine resumed, but Dorie could still hear the shouts in the wind, still see the white churn where the man had been. He carried the memory like a weight in the pocket of his mind. There was also the weight of knowing that some would never be recognized for what they endured. In a navy still divided by color, heroism did not always earn its rightful name. A man could do his duty with excellence, could save a life, could stand in harm's way, and still be remembered, if remembered at all, only for the job he'd been assigned, not the one he had taken on in the moment of need. Dorie saw it happen more than once, and each time it deepened his resolve to keep his own standards higher than any the Navy might set for him. Through all of it, the long hours, the heavy work, the closed doors, the constant readiness, the losses Dorie's way of enduring was simple, but not easy. He kept doing the next thing, and then the next, without letting bitterness turn his hands clumsy or his mind dull. He believed, perhaps stubbornly, that character showed itself in how you carried yourself when no one was looking, and how you treated others when you had nothing to gain. Some days the hardships seemed to pile like waves in a storm, each one breaking before the last had fully passed. But as with the sea, there were also calms, moments when the sun cut through the clouds and the water lay smooth as glass, moments when a letter arrived with good news, or a joke landed just right at the mess table, or a sunset painted the sky in colors that made even the hardest man pause. Those moments didn't erase the hardships, but they gave them shape, like shadows that prove the light exists. The morning of December 7th began with nothing to suggest it would be remembered by history. The air was still cool, touched by the damp breath of the Pacific. On deck, the light was a pale silver, as if the sun had been polished thin overnight. The harbor lay calm, dotted with the silhouettes of ships at anchor, great hulks of steel resting easy, their reflections stretching down into water, so still it seemed more mirror than sea. A few gulls wheeled lazily overhead, their calls carrying far in the quiet. Dorie rose as he had on 100 other mornings aboard the USS West Virginia. The low hum of the ship's machinery greeted him before the sound of any voice. Down in the mess, the air smelled of coffee and baking bread. He tied his apron and began the familiar work arranging trays, checking the steam tables, stirring a pot whose rhythm was as steady as his own breathing. There was a kind of peace in these routines. Outside the ship, the world might have been tightening toward war, but inside the galley, the work was the same, honest, tangible, and needed. Somewhere on the deck above, boots rang against steel as men moved to their stations. The ship's life was a slow unfurling each morning, engines adjusting their idle pumps, cycling with steady sighs, voices calling greetings down passageways. A good ship in a quiet harbor had its own kind of heartbeat. That heartbeat stopped at 7:55 a.m. The first alarm was not a sound so much as a tremor, a deep shudder that ran through the hull, making pans rattle in their racks. Then came the blast, a dull, heavy thump that seemed to fold the air in half. It was followed by shouting the sharp bark of orders, boots bounding toward battle stations. Dorie looked toward the nearest hatch, just as a second explosion rolled across the harbor. This one carried a flash of light, a brief and terrible bloom, seen through the porthole, orange and black against the morning silver. The air in the galley changed. It was suddenly alive with urgency, sharp with the smell of smoke carried down from above. All hands to battle stations. The call rang through the passageways. For a moment, Dorie hesitated. Mess attendants were not assigned to gunnery crews or damage control parties. His station in such an emergency was to assist where needed, carry messages, help the wounded. He pulled off his apron, tossed it onto a counter, and stepped into the current of men moving fast. On deck, the scene was chaos given form. The West Virginia shuddered again as another torpedo struck her port side. The sound, a deep gut-level impact, that seemed to knock the breath from the air itself. Smoke coiled from ruptured steel. Across the water, the sky above Ford Island was torn by the dark shapes of Japanese planes banking for another run. Their engines were a snarl, their wings painted with the red sun. Dorie's eyes caught movement ahead. Two sailors struggling to move an officer who had been thrown to the deck. Without thinking, he ran to them. The man's uniform was dark with blood, his breathing shallow. Together, they lifted him, carried him toward a safer position near the quarterdeck. Another blast threw them sideways. Dorie's grip tightened, refusing to let go. He set the officer down gently, then turned toward the source of the shouting near the aft. A call had gone out for someone to help feed ammunition to an unmanned 50 caliber anti-aircraft gun. The gun's crew had been hit in the first wave. Dorie had never been formally trained on that weapon. Mess attendants weren't. But in that moment, standing idle was not an option. He climbed into position behind the big twin-mounted Brownings, feeling the cold steel of the grips under his palms. The gun sight framed a slice of sky now busy with darting diving planes. He squeezed the triggers. The recoil came as a physical conversation between man and machine, sharp, insistent, and alive in his shoulders. Tracers leapt outward in bright threads, sewing the air in quick, brutal stitches. He could see the glint of metal in a diving plane's fuselage, the glimmer of the pilot's canopy, the sudden flare of smoke when a burst found its mark. The air was thick with sound, the tearing rip of machine guns, the bass thump of explosions, the howl of engines pulling hard against the sky. Smoke rolled across the deck in dirty waves, stinging the eyes, coating the tongue with the taste of burned fuel and hot metal. The smell was unforgettable, a mix of cordite oil and the acrid tang of fire eating paint from steel. Somewhere to his left, another gun opened up its rhythm, joining his in a harsh duet. He adjusted his aim, tracking a plane as it banked toward the battleship Oklahoma. The twin barrels bucked in his grip, heat building under his hands. Minutes lost their meaning. Each burst, each reload, each shout for ammunition was part of a single unbroken moment. Time stretched and compressed all at once, long enough to think of nothing but the next target, short enough that the attack's fury seemed to begin and end in the same breath. At one point, a plane streaked low over the West Virginia machine guns flashing. Dorie ducked instinctively, then rose again to fire his rounds, chasing the attacker into a climb. The world narrowed to the gun's iron sights, the swing of the barrels, the brief satisfaction when a tracer line found its prey. It could have been 5 minutes or 50 when the first wave passed. The harbor was a patchwork of flame and water oil, burning in slick rainbows that bled smoke into the sky. Ships lay listing, some already sinking their hulls open to the sea. Men moved through the chaos, some running, some crawling, some not moving at all. Dorie's arms ached. His hands were blackened with powder residue. He climbed down from the gun and turned toward the wounded. For the next stretch of time, how long he could not say, he became part of the effort to carry drag and lift men to safety. Sometimes that meant pulling them from the edge of a flooded compartment. Sometimes it meant shielding them from falling debris as fires burned unchecked. When the second wave came, he returned to the gun. The sky was already scarred with smoke trails, but the attackers pressed in again. The rhythm resumed: aim, fire, adjust, reload. His mind was empty, except for the work in front of him. At last, the all clear sounded. Not because the danger was gone, But because the attackers had left, the harbor was quieter now. But it was not the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of exhaustion, of shock. Fires still burned. The water lapped against twisted metal. Somewhere far off, a single gull cried as if the morning had begun again, without permission. Dorie stood for a moment, hands resting on the gun's grips, feeling the faint vibration of the cooling barrels. Around him, the crew was already tending to damage control to the wounded, to the grim work of counting the cost. In the hours that followed, there would be reports to file, questions to answer, tasks to complete. In the days to come, his actions would be noticed, written down, and passed upward through the chain of command. But in that moment, standing on the deck of a battered ship in a wounded harbor, Dorie Miller was not thinking about recognition. He was thinking about the faces he had seen, the men he had helped, and the work that still needed doing. And in the deepest part of himself, he was thinking that when the moment had come, he had not stood aside. When the fires at Pearl Harbor were finally under control, and the ships that could be saved were towed, patched, or sent for repairs, the harbor entered a strange season of silence. It was not the silence of peace. It was the pause after a deep wound, when the body gathers itself before moving again. The air still carried the smell of burned oil. The water, once a clear, welcoming blue, now held dark stains that no tide could quickly erase. Bent railings and twisted ladders remained where they had been, waiting for hands to cut them free. The West Virginia had survived, though she rested in the harbor's mud. Crews worked day after day to salvage her, to clear the wreckage from her decks, to recover what could be recovered. For Dorie, the work shifted from emergency to endurance. There were stores to move, compartments to clean, and wounded to visit when he could spare the time. Word of his actions spread quietly at first. A shipmate would mention it to another. An officer would note it in a report. In a navy where black sailors' deeds were too often overlooked, this attention was unusual. But it was hard to ignore a man who had carried the wounded through smoke and fire, then stood at a gun to defend his ship. Official recognition came months later. Dorie was awarded the Navy Cross, one of the nation's highest decorations for valor. The ceremony was brief, a moment in the presence of an admiral, the medal pinned to his uniform, a few words spoken about courage under fire. Cameras clicked, capturing the rare image of a black sailor receiving such an honor. But for Dorie, the medal was not a thing to be worn often. It stayed wrapped, stored carefully, brought out only when required. Recognition was not why he had acted. It was not what had filled his mind when the sky was thick with enemy planes. In his own telling, he had simply done what needed doing. The war went on, and so did Dorie's service. He was reassigned, served aboard other ships, and continued to work with the same quiet steadiness he had always shown. The dangers did not end with Pearl Harbor. Combat zones still lay ahead, and the ocean still held its own perils. In 1943, during the Battle of Mackinac Island, the ship he served on, the USS Liscombe Bay, was struck by a Japanese torpedo. The explosion was catastrophic. In the chaos and fire that followed, hundreds were lost. Among them was Doris Dorie Miller. He was 24 years old. No grave holds him. Like so many sailors, his final resting place is the sea. Yet his story did not vanish with him. The memory of what he did on that December morning in 1941 lived on in the men who saw it in the records of the Navy, and later in the telling and retelling by those who wanted the world to know. Schools would bear his name. Streets would be named for him. Decades later, a Navy ship, the USS Doris Miller, would be commissioned in his honor, the first aircraft carrier named for an African American. For those who serve, the measure of a man is not only in the medals he earns, but in the way he stands when it matters. By that measure, Dorie Miller stood as tall as any man who ever wore the uniform. His life was not without hardship, some born of the sea, some born of the world he lived in. He knew the weight of work, the limits placed on him, the loss of comrades. But he also knew the value of doing what was right in the moment, without hesitation and without thought for reward. If you were to walk along a quiet pier at dawn with the ships at anchor and the air just beginning to warm, you might imagine the kind of morning Dorie knew so well. The scrape of a boot on steel, the smell of coffee from the galley, the low murmur of voices preparing for another day. And you might think of a man who began such a morning expecting nothing more than the usual work, but who ended it having changed the story of his ship, his crew, and in a small but lasting way, his country. History often remembers the great ships, the battles, the names of admirals, but it also remembers, if we choose to keep telling it, the quiet courage of a mess attendant from Waco, Texas, who looked at the danger before him and stepped forward. And in the end, perhaps that is the truest kind of legacy, not the grand monuments or the polished speeches, but the simple fact that when the moment came, Doris Miller did not stand aside.